Every single day, we're bombarded with input, notifications, conversations, noise, opinions, distractions. But the brain doesn't process all of it equally. It has a very specific filter. That filter is called attention. And here's the powerful truth. What you repeatedly focus on, your brain physically rewires itself to prioritize. Focus isn't just about seeing or noticing something. Focus is a signal to your brain that says, this is important. Build around this. Neuroscientifically, this happens through a process called experience-dependent plasticity. Neurons, brain cells, form connections based on repeated patterns of activation. If you focus on something consistently, you're lighting up specific neural networks. And those networks begin to strengthen through a process known as long-term potentiation. This means the synapses, the connections between neurons, become more efficient. You begin to think faster, feel more intensely, and react more automatically to the very thing you've been focusing on. Focus is like weightlifting for the brain. Wherever you put the most repetitions, those muscles grow. So when someone says, I can't stop overthinking, or I'm always anxious, what they're often doing is reinforcing the same mental loop through repeated attention. Their focus is conditioning their brain to stay stuck. The more they focus on worst-case scenarios, comparisons, or doubts, the more those neural pathways become dominant. This isn't a character flaw. It's a wiring issue. And the good news is, just as the brain can wire itself into fear or stagnation, it can also wire itself into clarity, confidence, and momentum if you learn to redirect focus deliberately. The reticular activating system, RAST, is a network in your brainstem that acts like a gatekeeper of information. It determines what sensory data actually reaches your conscious awareness. The way it decides, based on what you've repeatedly paid attention to in the past. That means your brain is constantly tuning your reality, filtering it, shaping it based on your history of focus. This is why two people can be in the exact same environment with the same opportunities and yet see completely different worlds. One person sees stress, obstacles, problems. The other sees growth, purpose, solutions. The only difference is the calibration of focus. There's also the chemical side of attention. Dopamine, the brain's motivation molecule, is tightly linked to focused effort. When you lock in on something challenging but meaningful, dopamine increases. This doesn't just make you feel good, it increases energy, engagement, and future motivation. The very act of focusing begins to change the chemistry of your brain. Over time, your brain starts to prefer what you've trained it to attend to. Focus becomes self-reinforcing, but this can work in either direction. Focus on social media outrage, and your brain will become hypersensitive to conflict. Focus on your failures, and your brain will ignore your progress. Focus on discipline, and your brain will start filtering out excuses. It's not magic, it's biology. It's chemistry, it's training. Focus is also the first step in learning anything. The prefrontal cortex, which controls executive functions like planning and self-control, relies on your ability to suppress distractions and amplify relevant signals. The more efficiently you do this, the more capacity your brain has for deeper learning, insight, and creativity. Without focus, the brain is like a flashlight flickering in the dark. But with focus, it becomes a laser, directed, precise, and capable of making permanent impact. This is why your reality doesn't just happen to you. It's constructed through focus. Repeatedly think about a problem, and your brain will start filtering the world through that lens. Repeatedly think about progress, and your brain will start noticing steps forward that were invisible before. You're always training your mind, consciously or unconsciously, based on where you place your focus. Whether it's 5 minutes of focus on gratitude or 5 hours of focus on fear, both are building something. Focus is not neutral, it's active. It's shaping your nervous system, influencing your perception, and determining what kind of world you live in internally and externally. Your brain is a feedback loop. It responds to your focus with structural and chemical changes. It builds your emotional world, your self-image, and even your external results based on what you habitually return your attention to. Focus, then, isn't just a productivity skill. It's your creative force. It's the architect of your inner and outer reality. The question is not whether your focus is shaping your brain. The question is, what are you letting it shape you into? Focus is not unlimited. It's a biologically finite resource, just like physical strength or willpower. The brain operates on limited energy reserves, and the act of focusing, truly locking in and paying sustained attention, requires a tremendous amount of neural fuel. One of the most important insights from neuroscience is that focus depends heavily on the availability of neuromodulators, such as dopamine, norepinephrine, and acetylcholine. These chemicals regulate alertness, motivation, and selective attention, but they're not endlessly available. As your day progresses, as demands pile up, as stress accumulates, these reserves get depleted. Your brain is not designed to handle constant switching between tasks, tabs, conversations, or apps. Every time you shift your focus, your brain experiences a cognitive cost. It doesn't seamlessly jump from one thought to another. It burns energy. That's called task switching fatigue, and it has measurable consequences. When you bounce from one distraction to the next, text messages, emails, dopamine, hitting reels, you're draining the very chemicals required for deep focus, learning, and memory formation. It's like revving a car engine every few seconds without ever moving forward. You're using fuel, not building momentum. Research shows that after being distracted, it can take the brain up to 23 minutes to return to the same level of deep concentration. That means even a single disruption can cause a ripple effect that sabotages your mental performance for nearly half an hour. Multiply that by 10 or 20 distractions a day, and you begin to see the hidden cost. It's not just about losing time, it's about losing mental strength, clarity, and long-term focus endurance. You are teaching your brain that it's okay to be fractured. Over time, that training becomes a habit, and habits become personality traits. In the neuroscience of attention, the prefrontal cortex is the control tower of your focus. It's the region responsible for planning, impulse control, sustained attention, and executive function, but it's also highly vulnerable to overload. When you try to do too many things at once or multitask, the prefrontal cortex becomes saturated. It starts to underperform. That's when you feel mentally exhausted, unfocused, or anxious without knowing why. Your system has been overstimulated and under-recovered. Focus is like a muscle. It gets fatigued when overused and weak when undertrained. There's also a biological rhythm to your focus. Human beings tend to have ultradian cycles, natural 90 to 120 minute periods of heightened alertness followed by dips. The mistake most people make is ignoring these cycles. They try to stay locked in all day without breaks, draining their neurochemical reserves until nothing is left. The result isn't just burnout, it's shallow work. You end up being busy, but ineffective, stimulated, but not productive. To truly focus, you have to respect your body's rhythm and recover with intention. Short breaks, movement, hydration, and strategic rest aren't luxuries, they're biological necessities. One of the greatest modern threats to focus is the fragmentation of attention. Social media, email notifications, constant access to stimulation. It all creates a dopamine feedback loop that trains your brain to expect novelty every few seconds. This artificial environment reshapes the brain's reward circuitry. Instead of craving deep work, the brain becomes addicted to micro rewards, likes, alerts, red bubbles. Over time, the brain begins to resist silence, boredom, and stillness, precisely the states required for creativity, clarity, and deep learning. You begin to feel uncomfortable in the absence of stimulation. That discomfort leads you back to distraction, reinforcing the cycle. To guard your focus, you have to set boundaries, not just with people, but with your digital environment. It's not about being antisocial or disconnected. It's about protecting your mind like a valuable asset. If someone was stealing your money, you'd stop them. But when your time and focus are stolen, you often allow it, thinking you'll recover later. The truth is, every day spent in distraction shapes your brain to be more distractible tomorrow. The habit of scattered attention doesn't just affect one afternoon, it compounds into a lifestyle. Focus is currency. You pay for every moment you give away. And the more intentional you are with your attention, the more value you create over time. When you learn to protect your focus like gold, you begin to regain control of your energy, your direction, and the shape of your internal and external world imposed from the outside. But in reality, emotional states are not just reactions, they are shaped, amplified, and sustained by where you place your attention. What you focus on directly controls how you feel, because your brain constructs emotions based on the input you continually highlight. The amygdala, one of the brain's emotional processing centers, is highly sensitive to what your attentional system prioritizes. If your attention is tuned toward perceived threats, mistakes, judgments, or uncertainty, the amygdala becomes more active. This increased activity triggers a cascade of physiological responses: elevated cortisol, higher heart rate, muscle tension, shallow breathing. You're not just thinking about stress, you're embodying it. All of this can be initiated simply by focusing on the wrong set of thoughts, conversations, or narratives. You may not realize it, but the moment your attention drifts to fear-based content, whether it's internal dialogue or external noise, your biology follows. On the flip side, if you shift your attention to progress, learning, or possibility, your brain activates different neural networks. It begins to release dopamine, which is a neuromodulator associated with motivation, pleasure, and forward movement. Even the anticipation of achieving something, when imagined clearly and with intention, can trigger the reward circuitry. This doesn't mean ignoring reality or pretending everything is perfect. It means strategically using attention to shift your emotional chemistry. The brain doesn't care if what you're imagining is real or hypothetical. It responds to focus with neurochemical action. Consider the concept of a mental filter.